Assalamu alaikum. MashaAllah, we can do better than that. Come on, more passion, more energy. Come on. Assalamu alaikum. Today, I've come to share with you something that is a powerful tool that we can use when going through difficulty in our lives. Anybody guess what that tool is that Allah Azza wa Jal gives us? Shout it out. Sabr, yes, but how can we cultivate that sabr in our lives? Anybody know? The Quran, through the Quran, Allah Azza wa Jal, through His mercy, has sent down a book containing His words that is a mercy and a guidance for those who truly want that guidance and who take heed. So, inshallah, today we'll be going through a very, very powerful story. The story of Yusuf alayhi salam. Who here loves the story of Yusuf alayhi salam? Put your hands up. MashaAllah. All of us. And for good reason. Allah Azza wa Jal tells us that in this story is one of the best narrations. It's one of the best stories because it contains so many lessons for us. And subhanAllah, we see that the prophets whom Allah Azza wa Jal gave nubuwwah to, they are just humans like us. They have feelings just like us. They go through difficulty just like us. They get tested in ways, subhanAllah, just like us. And we'll see that inshallah in the story of Yusuf alayhi salam. So I want to start off with when Yusuf alayhi salam was taken by his brothers and they plotted to throw him into the well. They wanted Yusuf alayhi salam to be gone because they were jealous that he was the most beloved to their father. SubhanAllah, when they put him into the well and they threw him down, they thought they were done. They came back to their father with a shirt that they stained with blood. The father, when he saw this, what was his first reaction? He just got the news that he lost his dear son. He was young. My son's disappeared. Where is he? What's happening to him? SubhanAllah, his reaction was none other than فَصَبْرٌ جَمِيلٌ وَاللَّهُ الْمُسْتَعَانُ عَلَى مَا تَصِفُونَ. What powerful words that he never said, "What have you done? You guys are going to pay for it." You know how parents sometimes, subhanAllah, out of their anger and frustration, they sometimes curse their kids. Yakub alayhi salam could have done that to his kids. But instead, what did he do? He said, "I have nothing remaining except for beautiful patience. And to Allah, I will take this complaint and seek His help against what you guys have just told me." SubhanAllah, what kind of iman does that father have that he doesn't curse his children and he doesn't start, panicking. Instead, he relies totally on Allah. Now, this part is just the beginning. SubhanAllah, this story is a story that goes on for years and years and years. Scholars say that this story is 40 years long. 40 years that Yakub alayhi salam spent with this patience and this forbearance that he had. SubhanAllah, when we see later on, years later, the brothers, they are sent again to go and get some food because they were facing some famine. And then we see, subhanAllah, that they again lose one of their other brothers, who, Binyamin, because the whole situation, as you all must know since it's your favorite story, that he got taken. And the way that Allah Azza wa Jal planned it for Yaqub alayhi salam to bring back his sons, again, he faces the news of the loss of yet another one of his sons, that his son was remaining behind, he didn't come back. What does he say again? almost 40 years later, what does he tell them? فَصَبْرٌ جَمِيلٌ عَسَى اللَّهُ أَن يَأْتِيَنِي بِهِمْ جَمِيعًا. My Lord will bring them all back to me. SubhanAllah, his reliance on Allah and his faith in Allah is so powerful that he knows that Allah won't let him down. Remember when Yusuf alayhi salam saw that dream and he told his father about it, and his father knew that Allah is giving you good news, glad tidings, that there is something positive to come out of this boy and his life. So Yusuf alayhi salam knew instantly that this is all a plan of Allah and all he has to do is to bear patience. And my dear sisters, when we go through trials in life and we don't understand why is this happening to me, and I thought I did all that I could, like I'm a good believer, I pray my salah, I obey Allah's commands, why am I still being tested? Well, it's because Allah has a plan. Just like how He had a plan for Yakub alayhi salam and Yusuf alayhi salam. And subhanallah, what we see is then after that, what does He say? إِنَّهُ هُوَ الْعَلِيمُ الْحَكِيمُ. Allah, my Creator, my Lord, who tested me in this way for years on end, He is the most knowledgeable and the most wise. SubhanAllah, look at that. He is making mention of the attributes of Allah, that He is the all-knowledgeable and the all-wise. That means for sure He cannot let me down at all. And subhanAllah, the story is beautiful because He then goes on to say, وَتَوَلَّى عَنْهُمْ وَقَالَ يَا أَسَفَ عَلَى يُوسُف. He turns around, and after he says this to his sons, that Allah will not let me down. Oh, my grief on Yusuf alayhi salam. Meaning that he felt the pain. He still felt the pain, even though he had sabr, okay, and he endured. But he still felt the pain. And that, my dear sisters, is incredible. Because a lot of times we think that when going through sabr, we shouldn't be feeling this pain. It should be easy upon us. But here we see a prophet of Allah who had so much faith in Allah, and the fact that He's going to bring back to him his sons. He still was grieving, and he still felt that pain. And what does he say after that? وَبْيَضَّتْ عَيْنَاهُ مِنَ الْحُزْنِ فَهُوَ كَظِيمٌ. He actually went blind. His eyes turned white from the level of tears that he had over the years and the level of crying that he was doing, subhanallah. But the best part was, he was suppressing it from his sons. He didn't complain to his sons about this. His sons, in fact, they didn't understand. Why is our father grieving like this? It's been so many years. Let it go. Just forget about it. But instead, they tell him, قَالُوا تَاللَّهِ تَفْتَأُ تَذْكُرُ يُوسُف. That by Allah, you will not cease to stop mentioning about Yusuf alayhi salam. Enough. Because they wanted to get rid of him long time ago. And instead, their father for all of these years just kept remembering him, mentioning him, and feeling that grief. So they said to their father that you will continue to talk about Yusuf alayhi salam until حتى تكون حرضا أو تكون من الهالكين, until you either lose one of your senses, and you become frail, or your life even ends. Meaning you'll just carry on like this. It's no point, no use, right? But what does he say? قال إنما أشكو بثي وحزني إلى الله. That I only complain of my anguish and my sorrow to Allah. وأعلم من الله ما لا تعلمون. And I know from Allah that which you do not know. His faith, again, was so strong. He went through a very human trial, losing his son. But yet he still stayed strong in that faith that he had all these years later, subhanAllah. And he didn't even complain to anyone else except for Allah. My dear sisters, that is the essence of sabr, where you don't complain to other people. Other people can't do anything anyways. They can't take away your pain. They can't come into your heart, take that pain away. No. But Allah can make it easy upon you. Turn to Him. Complain to Him. Tell Him about how you're feeling, your pain, your anguish in your heart, and ask Him for the relief. What does Yaqub alayhi salam do after that? Not only does he turn to Allah in dua, he actually sends his sons back. He tells his sons, يا بني يذهبوا فتحسسوا من يوسف وأخيه ولا تيأسوا من روح الله إنه لا ييأس من روح الله إلا القوم الكافرون. That, oh my sons, go back to where you left Binyamin and go and find Yusuf. Yusuf might be there. Go and find him. Don't lose hope in the mercy of Allah. Only the disbelievers, those who are not aware of who Allah is, they lose hope in Him. The believer who knows who Allah is, who knows His attributes, that He is Al-Alim, Al-Hakim, Al-Khabir, He is Al-Adl, the most just, He is the all-wise, the all-aware, He is the best of planners. They never lose hope. No matter how difficult the trial gets, they don't lose hope. They stand firm and they remind themselves that, and those around them, that this is just a test. Allah has a plan for me. Allah knows what He's doing, and Allah will bring the best of outcomes. And subhanAllah, for Yaqub alayhi salam, what happened? Allah proved that to be true. That eventually his sons came back to him in the most beautiful way. His eyesight was returned to him. Right? And this is the power of faith. When we have faith in Allah, Allah can do more for us than we ever imagined. Allah can amaze us with what He's got in store for us. And we just have to trust. Let that be the way Allah planned it, and trust. So my dear sisters, that's just the story of Yaqub and his patience. Let's look at now the story of Yusuf alayhi salam himself and his patience, because he went through a very long journey of twists and turns. And subhanAllah, just when he thought he was getting back up, another calamity. Just when he thought he was getting back up, another test. And what did he do? Again, he too remained steadfast. He too remained patient. But the test that I want to talk about with regards to Yusuf alayhi salam, we know that he faced the test of being thrown into the well, being there by himself. Then he was taken by some people, sold as a slave. But one of the biggest tests that he went through, and Allah mentions this beautifully in the surah, is the test of desire. Is the test that he faced when the wife of the Aziz, she closed the doors and it was just him and her. And he was in his prime. Can you imagine, like desires all high, right? He had the opportunity to fulfill his desires with this woman. She closed the door. She said to him, Hayta lak, come to me. There's no one around. She tried to seduce him. She was a woman of high status. You can imagine that would be privilege for Yusuf alayhi salam, that, oh wow, he got, a woman of high status. But instead, what did he say? Ma'adallah, I seek refuge in Allah. I will run to Allah. I will not come to you. Innahu Rabbi ahsana mathwai. Indeed, my Lord is the best of those whom I can seek refuge in. He will take care of me. He will protect me from you. Innahu la yuflihu adh-dhalimun. Indeed, those who oppress and who do wrong, they will never be successful. he remembered in this time of desire, he remembered Allah and he sought refuge in Allah because he knew his desires could overtake him. He could do anything. But instead, if he turned to Allah and asked of Allah, Allah will shelter him from that sin that he was about to fall into. And truly, because Allah then goes on to say, وَلَقَدْ هَمَّتْ بِهِ وَهَمَّ بِهَا لَوْلَا أَن رَأَى بُرْهَانَ رَبِّهِ. She fell for him, right? She was actually intending him. She was surely going to seduce him. And he would have done so too. He would have done so too. He's human. لَوْلَا أَن رَأَى بُرْهَانَ رَبِّهِ. If he had not seen the proof of his Lord, i.e. he remembered his Lord. He remembered that even though I am alone right now with this woman, and subhanAllah, when we think of our situations when we're alone, what we can get up to, right? But then we remember Allah is watching. Allah is there. Allah knows, He sees. And we can't betray ourselves and let Allah down, like make Him displeased. No way. And so he goes on to say, كَذَلِكَ لِنَصْرِفَ عَنْهُ السُّوءَ وَالْفَحْشَاءَ إِنَّهُ مِنْ عِبَادِنَا الْمُخْلَصِينَ. That like that, okay, because of his turning back to us, we averted for him that desire and that evil and immorality. And the main reason why we did that was because he was from the sincere servant. My dear sisters, when we have sincerity in our hearts, and Allah knows that we don't want to disobey Him, we don't want to displease Him. We love Allah. We don't want for our records to be tarnished in the sight of Allah. Allah will save us and protect us from situations that we're about to fall into haram, we're about to fall into sin. And Allah makes it such that He averts it. And that is, again, the essence of sabr. To restrain oneself from the desire and the temptation that we feel, to battle our nafs, and to remember that Allah has in store for us in the hereafter that which no eye has ever seen, no ear has ever heard of, and no heart has ever perceived. And then, subhanAllah, the story goes on that Yusuf alayhi salam, as a result of him refusing to indulge in this sin, what happened thereafter? He was going to get thrown into prison, right? The woman, she couldn't handle it and she was of status. She was like, okay, you're going to refuse me? You're going to be thrown in the prison. What did he say? قال رب السجن أحب إلي مما يدعونني إليه. That, oh my Lord, now he's having a conversation with his Lord. Imagine, his connection with Allah is such that he has conversations with him. And he says, oh my Lord, prison is better for me than what they are inviting me to. SubhanAllah, he chose a hard route to be thrown into prison, instead of for that split second indulging in the sin that he was being invited to. And as a result, what happened? The Prophet ﷺ tells us that if you leave something for the sake of Allah, Allah will reward you with something better. Better than you've ever imagined. And as a result, years later, Yusuf ﷺ, what happens to him? He becomes the Aziz of Egypt. He becomes the minister. He's put in a high position. His name is cleared. And he has such high authority on the land. SubhanAllah, because for that moment, he chose to sacrifice. He chose to restrain against his desire. And as a result, what happened? He got given better than what he ever imagined. SubhanAllah. So in that is a very big lesson for all of us, that when faced with desire, temptation, what our nafs wants us to do, we remember Allah. We say, Ma'ad Allah. Allah is the refuge that we seek. we shall not indulge in this to gain this pleasure for a few minutes. Instead, we seek everlasting bliss in the hereafter. And my dear sisters, that is the second main type of patience that Allah mentions in this surah. And the third and final type of patience that Allah mentions in this surah is, again, to do with Yusuf alayhi salam. Another very, very beautiful point. And that is, when Yusuf alayhi salam is faced with his brothers, yet again, years later. Now you can imagine Yusuf alayhi salam and how he must be feeling that my brothers did this to me, my own blood brothers, siblings, they're supposed to be there for you, look out for you, and love you, right? But instead, they hated him and they were jealous of him. Years later, when it comes that Allah turned the tables around and Yusuf alayhi salam was now the minister and his brothers came, he recognized them, but they didn't know who he was. When the incident happened with Binyamin and what he had in his bag, that he had to remain behind, right? And it was all a plan that Allah devised so that Yusuf alayhi salam could get his brother with him and then they could all return back to their parents. So what does Yusuf alayhi salam's brothers say to him? They say, إِن يَسْرِقْ فَقَدْ سَرَقَ أَخٌ لَهُ مِنْ قَبْلِ. If he's stolen, if they found what they needed in his bag, and they needed to keep him behind, right? So what did they say? This is what we call in our times passive-aggressive, okay? They started saying, yeah, if he's stolen, guess what? He had a brother who also stole. So they're just the same. And little did they know, they're talking to Yusuf alayhi salam. And they actually they're not aware of this, but Yusuf alayhi salam is aware of this. He keeps it in himself. فأسرها يوسف في نفسه ولم يبدها لهم قال أنتم شر مكانا. You guys are the ones that are in a worse position right now. You guys are the ones coming to me and asking me for provisions, right? Because you're going through a hard time. And yet you have the cheek to say such things. He could have easily sworn at his brothers, told his brothers, yeah, this is what you think. No, he actually kept it to himself. And he restrained himself. He had sabr. He restrained himself from taking revenge, saying words that might hurt his brothers in return. And that's what Islam teaches us. Allah tells us in the Quran, idfa' billati hiya ahsan. When people do harm to you, don't do harm to them in return. That's the low path. Take the higher path. And the higher path is to actually not say anything. Keep quiet. Let Allah deal with them. And Allah dealt with them, right? Because then they had to come back again. The story is quite long and I can't go into detail due to lack of time, but subhanAllah, read up on it. They come back again and Yusuf alayhi salam says to them, do you know what you did to your brother? And they think for a moment, which brother? Like this has been years and years that they've got rid of Yusuf alayhi salam. And they're like, no way, this cannot be. That right now, this is Yusuf. So they say, قَالُوا أَإِنَّكَ لَأَنْتَ يُوسُف. Are you Yusuf? And what does he say? قَالَ أَنَا يُوسُف وَهَذَا أَخِي. I am Yusuf and this is my brother. They understood that he is in a better position than them. So they say, تَاللَّهِ لَقَدْ آثَرَكَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْنَا. For real? Like, wallah, you've actually been given this position so high? And we can't even believe it. SubhanAllah, imagine for a moment, they wanted to kill him, get rid of him. And the way Allah planned his story to be of a high-ranking person in society. And then they tell Yusuf alayhi salam that we were from the ones who did the mistake. They recognized. And they were remorseful for what they did. And what does Yusuf alayhi salam do? He doesn't sit there and say, well, now you're going to have to pay the price. For all those years that I went through all the difficulty because of you guys throwing me in the well. No. Instead, he says, لا تثريب عليكم اليوم. There is no blame upon you today. Today, I've forgiven you. You're free to go. And that, again, my dear sisters, is the essence of sabr. To know that when you have the opportunity to take revenge, you don't. You choose the higher path. You choose the path that will earn the ultimate pleasure of Allah, because Allah is al-afu. Allah loves to forgive. His quality is that He's ever forgiving. So why wouldn't we want to do that when somebody is remorseful? And when somebody isn't remorseful, just let it go. Let Allah deal with it. We have about a minute left, and I'd just like to touch up on one last point. Patience upon the obedience of Allah. This is another form of patience. When Yusuf alayhi salam was thrown into the prison, unjustly, he didn't sit there and say, oh yeah, Allah let me down. Allah hates me. He put me in this bad position. No, his faith was still so strong because he knew that Allah had a plan for him. He chose to give da'wah to those around him in the prison. He chose to capitalize on that moment that Allah gave him. And instead, he looked at the bright side. What can I do in this situation that Allah has placed me in? What can I do that will bring about the pleasure of Allah? When the two men come to ask for interpretation of their dream, before he gives them the interpretation of the dream, he tells them, don't worry, I'll give you the interpretation, but first I want you to know that I am a believer. I believe in Allah. I've left behind all the worship of idols, and instead I chose to believe in the oneness of Allah. That again is the essence of sabr. Where you're in a difficult situation, but you persist. You persist on the obedience of Allah, and you capitalize on that moment and use it to your advantage, to gain a closeness to Allah. And with that, my dear sisters, I end off. Until next time, أقول قولي هذا وصلى الله وسلم